Governor Ferron of our board has graciously agreed to introduce our next speaker, Commissioner Liane Randolph from the California Public Utilities Commission. So please join me in a warm welcome to Mark Ferron.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's great to see you all this morning. I apologize for the croakiness of my voice, but I'm going to blame Angelina. I couldn't quite keep up with her pace of socializing last night. This is, I believe, my fourth symposium, two as a commissioner on the Public Utilities Commission, and two now as a member of the board of the California Independent System Operator. And I think the thing that I'm most struck by is the amazing pace of change and degree of complexity and the way at which this really appears to be accelerating. So whether we're talking about technology or customer choice or markets and price signals or finance or operations or whatever, jurisdictional issues, the pace of change is really quite amazing. And I think the thing that, at least in my mind, that kind of holds this together and gives it direction is policy, and in particular, legislative policy. And I'd like to address one piece of legislation in particular, which I think is going to have such a critical impact over the next few years, and that's Senate Bill 350. For those of you who are not from California, I think SB 350 gets the award for truth in labeling in terms of it does exactly what it says on the label. It's the Clean Energy and Pollution Reduction Act of 2015. The bill number itself comes from 350s, a 50% RPS, a 50% improvement in the energy efficiency of buildings, and a 50% reduction in petroleum use, which didn't quite make the final stages and became a real focus on investing in transportation electrification, in particular the charging infrastructure across the state. But there were a couple of additional, I'd say, bonus prizes in the box of Cracker Jack that 350 represented. One we talked about, and that is the authorization to the ISO to investigate the possibilities and the benefits of having a West-wide ISO. And I think we will see in time the next turn of that happening, hopefully over the next 8 to 9 months. But then the other piece, which arrived as part of 350, was the direction tasking the CPUC to adopt a process by the end of next year around integrated resource planning, and specifically to focus on the impact on disadvantaged communities in the decision-making process, and to unify the vast number of proceedings in the PUC that have to do with areas of procurement and the like, bringing together some 18, 19 different proceedings potentially into one place, which will make it easier to follow. So for those of you who share my concern about how California is going to preserve and continue to promote its environmental goals and its energy policy goals, this is really going to be the integrated resource planning process at the PUC is going to be front and center around that process. And I'm delighted to introduce to you Commissioner Liane Randolph. She has been given the unenviable task of being the lead commissioner on the IRP, and I'm so glad that she's able to talk to us today. Commissioner Randolph was appointed to the CPUC by Governor Brown in January 2015. She formerly served as Deputy Secretary and General Counsel at the California Natural Resources Agency and held positions as the chair of the California Fair Political Practices Commission from 2003 to 2007. She has a long history of understanding law and process. She is an expert in government and administrative law, and she brings a real breath of fresh air to the PUC. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Commissioner Liane Randolph.
Good morning, and thank you to the CAISO Board of Governors for inviting me to speak, and thanks to Tom for organizing this great conference that's running like clockwork. It's very impressive. As Mark mentioned, change is a big theme of this conference, and it's a theme of my speech, dealing with the challenges of change in a rapidly evolving new energy world. And as Chairman Bay mentioned earlier, we are, just in the course of this day and a half, we are talking about big issues of going wide and looking at regionalization as a way to solve some of these challenges. And we're looking small at distributed energy resources as ways to address these challenges. And having the opportunity over the last few years to get to know the talented people in this industry, I am confident that we can come up with some really interesting solutions to these issues. And SB 350 is leading us to some of those solutions. As you sit here in the room, kind of take a moment and think about, as Mark mentioned, what aspect of your work is affected by 350. And I was originally going to say, if your work is affected by SB 350, raise your hand, but truthfully, I hate when people ask me to raise my hand at conferences, so I won't ask you. And since we're streaming live, I have a good excuse, right? Because the people watching it can't see it. But my guess is there's a fair number of you who are working very hard on SB 350 implementation issues. And at its highest level, of course, SB 350 does two really important things. It builds on the past successes of the renewable portfolio standards, energy efficiency, working on electric vehicles. But it also provides us guidance going forward and looking and asks us to take on some new challenges like the integrated resource planning issues. As you look at the graphs that show the trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions, you see that as California has implemented these policies over the last several years, the emissions trajectory improves, but only for so long, because ultimately the solutions that we have been implementing over the last few years don't quite get us there. We have to do more, and that's what SB 350 is all about, is getting us to the point where we are doing more. And we are recognizing that what we have right now has helped, but doesn't get us all the way. So that is the urgency and the mission that underlies SB 350. How are we going to bend the emissions trajectory downward? As you know, California's investor-owned utilities follow a resource loading order when they procure resources on behalf of customers. This concept has been instrumental in prioritizing conservation and zero emissions or low emissions resources when evaluating the relative cost effectiveness of a range of supply and demand side resources. But the new priority that Governor Brown, Senator De Leon, and the legislature added is the achievement of emissions reductions as a cornerstone of the electric portfolios for California's load-serving entities. It's not just a byproduct, it is the goal of the portfolio. To do this, the PUC and the entities that serve California's needs must conduct integrated resource planning. And the law says, because I'm a lawyer and I have to quote it, must identify a diverse and balanced portfolio of resources needed to ensure a reliable electricity supply that provides optimal integration of renewable energy in a cost-effective manner. It's a very clear direction. So the problem statement is no longer, how do we get more renewables on the grid? Or how do we achieve our energy efficiency goal in a silo by itself? A more effective problem statement is what kind of electric grid and tariffs are needed to maximize the value of our existing and potential clean energy resources to achieve that long-term GHG emissions goal. It's an important evolution of state policy. This overarching environmental objective, GHG emissions reductions, is elevated to equal stature with our mission to safeguard Californians by providing safe and reliable utility service at a reasonable cost. The loading order still exists, yet as stressed by the governor and the legislature, we need to operationalize that loading order differently, where clean energy resources compete against each other to provide the attributes needed by the grid and demanded by customers. So at the PUC, we have the integrated resources planning proceeding underway, and it has several complicated elements that we are working through. First, modeling. The technical modeling needed to manage a complex IRP envisioned for California is a challenging undertaking. And we plan to build upon the modeling that's been underway for several years in past PUC proceedings and improve and operationalize that modeling to achieve the goals we need. Process alignment is absolutely critical. We, in our long-term planning, need to be working with the ISO closely. We need to be working with the Energy Commission closely. We need to be working with the Air Resources Board closely as they set our emissions targets. And we have to ensure that the careful process alignment that those agencies have done over the last several years, which took a lot of work to get to, is not impacted by this, and instead we can make sure the IRP process builds on the process alignment, and we can create a new structure to ensure that we are providing the ISO what it needs, when it needs it, CEC what it needs, when it needs it, and all of the agencies continue to work together. We also need to be thinking about scenarios and assumptions as we work on modeling and determining what the appropriate inputs are. What power plants are running and how often, what are our energy efficiency assumptions, how many electric vehicles are on the road. We have to ensure that that web of collaboration continues in an effective manner, and we are continually working with our sister agencies to make sure that happens. We also want to make sure that the parties in the proceeding have an opportunity to participate in those kinds of questions and conversations. We are defining IRP version 1.0 with the full knowledge that version 2.0 will come very shortly thereafter. The legislature gave us a pretty tight deadline. And so as we work towards that deadline, and as we work with our sister agencies in developing this, we recognize that we're not going to get it right the very first cycle. And so we assume that we're going to be making some tweaks in the next cycle and maybe the next cycle, and we will keep working on that. We are looking for regulatory efficiency where we can find it. As Mark mentioned, we are in active conversation about what proceedings can possibly be folded into this so that parties have less proceedings to participate in. I can promise you that no one in this room will think we are doing that fast enough, because it's going to be really hard. But it is a goal, and it is something that we are working towards, and we want to get to a point where some of these proceedings that are closely related can actually be combined. And so, even if you don't see that right away, I promise you we are working on it. Lastly, transparency and regulatory certainty are important issues. I've worked with our staff that is managing the substantive work on this proceeding to ensure that we have a process that involves working groups and workshops and encourages widespread participation and commenting. Our staff put out a concept paper recently, held a webinar to explain the concept paper and answer questions, and there'll be workshops in the fall to give folks an opportunity to comment on that work in the future. This is important because the law requires us to undertake this notion of resource optimization that we haven't done in the past. So there's going to be some moments of nervousness in the next few years, and I want to make sure that we have a process that is open and provides plenty of opportunity for expression of that nervousness and some give and take in terms of trying to resolve these challenges. As Mark mentioned, another mandate in SB 350 is to focus our attention on disadvantaged communities. Through numerous legislative actions, the governor and the legislature are directing resources to improve the health and well-being of Californians living in our most disadvantaged communities. I'm committed to making sure that the IRP process considers the impacts and opportunities for disadvantaged communities stemming from resource planning and procurement decisions under our jurisdiction. And we are collaborating with the Energy Commission on the SB 350 required study that looks at barriers for low-income customers and disadvantaged communities in accessing renewable energy, energy efficiency, and weatherization investments. I want to make sure that we not only think about the typical issues that pop up when we're considering disadvantaged communities and low-income individuals, but to try to be forward-looking. For instance, as we move towards greater penetration of electric vehicles and use of storage, are we making sure that our battery disposal system, for instance, is keeping pace with those changing times? Because that's an area where low-income communities have been impacted by resource disposal issues. And I want to make sure we're working with our sister agencies so they're aware of trends as they're going to start happening and are ready to respond in their regulatory jurisdiction. Commissioner Akiba mentioned time-of-use rates earlier, and this is one of those change areas. It's not directly within IRP, but it's an important issue of outreach and communication. And the Commission has been working hard with our investor-owned utilities to ensure that there's enough marketing and communication and outreach about change to customers to ensure that our residential time-of-use rates are clear to our customers, because time-of-use rates are another example of opportunities for ensuring that renewables are integrated properly into the grid. And last summer, we adopted a residential rates decision that requires default time-of-use rates by 2019. And so as part of that solution, we want to make sure that people know how these work, are comfortable with them, don't choose to move off of them because they don't understand them. So we are working on making sure that the utilities are outreaching, making sure that our staff are outreaching to the communities so that our integration strategy is effective. We get a lot of questions on how does regionalization relate to IRP? And as was discussed at the earlier panel, most of these solutions are not mutually exclusive. Integration solutions like increased electric vehicles, like time of use rates, and potentially ultimately like regionalization will all be inputs into our integrated resource planning process so that as the load-serving entities come up with their plans and figure out how to reduce their emissions and how to meet their goals, that they have the information about all of those potential solutions and are able to model all those potential solutions and figure out what the best approach is. So I will close by just noting some organizational changes at the PUC. Organizational change is always a challenge, and we have been working hard at the Commission to sort of change our structural processes so that we can move along with the changes in the industry as effectively as possible. The legislature has focused on us in terms of some changes, not quite as many as we thought they were going to, but we will be in the coming year implementing some of the direction the legislature has given us in terms of new rules about how we communicate, how other people communicate with us. So you should, those of you who interact with the Commission a lot should keep an eye on that. We have, as you may know, we have commissioner committees that meet the day before our business meetings, and we talk about these issues. All the commissioners get together, talk about organizational challenges, organizational transition. We've adopted a commissioner code of conduct. We have a fully searchable real-time log of ex parte meetings that parties participate in. So you can just log on to that and see who's meeting with what commissioners on what proceedings. The legislature has given us a lot of new positions, and we have been very fortunate that we are going to be able to bring some new folks on to help us implement all this direction from the legislature. So for those of you who weren't attracted by the clean living discussion yesterday about Idaho, you can come work for the PUC. We are vastly increasing our staff in several areas of the state, San Francisco, Sacramento, Los Angeles. So if you know folks who are interested in making cutting-edge policy, encourage them to apply. We have a great staff, and we are sometimes very frustrated that we can't do enough to make sure that they feel appreciated, but we do appreciate them, and we hope other folks will come and join them, because it really is, there are very few jobs out there where you get the kind of real-world policy experience and challenge anywhere. And so if you know anyone who's looking, I encourage you to send us our way. So in closing, I think I've covered enough change possibilities, and so I thank you very much for your attention, and I have no doubt that with all of the talent in this room and elsewhere, that the state will be ready to meet these challenges and ready to create the greenhouse gas emissions that SB 350 asks us to. Thank you.